broadcast on how to respond to opposition, and if we take a look at 1 Corinthians 16:9, Paul says, "For a wide open door has been opened to me, but there are many who oppose it." And so we see, just because God opened the door for Paul to do something great, something that was in his will, didn't mean there weren't obstacles or challenges to overcome in facing that. We're going to take a look at an Old Testament story where that seemed to be the case also, where God had in mind something he wanted to do, but there was human opposition and there was difficulties along the way. And so what we got to remember is, in time, sometimes we may be going in a way that God wants us to go, and suddenly all things seem to be coming together, and then all of a sudden things just seem to come to hit a brick wall, and we got to take a look. Let's take a look at that scripture real quick. When the enemies of Judah and Benjamin heard that the exiles were building the temple of the Lord, the God of Israel, they came to Zerubbabel and the heads of the families and said, "Let us help you build, because like you we seek your God and have been sacrificing to him since Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, who brought us here." But Zerubbabel, Joshua, and the rest of the heads of the families of Israel answered, "You have no part in building the temple of our God. We alone will build it for the Lord, the God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, commanded us." The people around them set out to discourage the people of Judah and make them afraid to go on building. So they bribed the officials and worked against them to frustrate their plans during the entire reign of Cyrus, king of Persia, down to the reign of Darius, king of Persia. And so we see at first Cyrus started to issued a proclamation to enable these Jews to go back and start rebuilding Jerusalem. He even provided money from the treasury to do that. And so God's hand was truly in this. But we see there were people who were not happy with this progression. And then it goes on to say, at the beginning of the reign of Xerxes, they lodged accusations against the people of Judah and Jerusalem. And in the days of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, Bishlam, Mithridath, Tabeel, and the rest of his associates wrote letters to Artaxerxes. The letters were written in Aramaic script and the Aramaic language. Rehum, the commanding officer, and Shimshai, the secretary, wrote letters against Jerusalem to Artaxerxes the king as follows. Rehum and the commanding officers, Shimshai, the secretary, together with the rest of their associates, the judges, the officials, the administrators over the people of Persia, Uruk, Babylon, and Elamanites of Susa. The other people whom the great and honored Ashurbanipal deported and settled in the city of Samaria and elsewhere in the Trans-Euphrates. This is the copy of the letter they sent to him. King Artaxerxes, from your servants in the Trans-Euphrates, the king should know that there is people that came up to us from you, have gone to Jerusalem and are rebuilding that rebellious and wicked city. They are restoring the walls and repairing the foundations. Furthermore, the king should know that this city is built and its walls restored. No more taxes, tributes, or duty would be paid. And eventually the royal revenues will suffer. Now, since you are under obligation to the palace and it is not proper for us to see the king dishonored, we are sending you this message to inform the king, so that a search may be made of the archives of your predecessors. In these records you will find this city is a rebellious city, troublesome to the king and provinces, the place with a long history of sedition. That is why this city was destroyed. We inform you, the king, that it is this city. If this city is to be rebuilt and the walls are restored, you will be left with nothing in the Trans-Euphrates. And so we see, the funny thing is, they mentioned the history, the past of the people when God brought judgment and carried them into exile to Babylon. They mentioned that part, but they left out the part where Cyrus, the king of Persia, authorized them to go back and rebuild that. So they left out the part of the story that would not fit their narrative well, and they really tried to spin things in such a way to frustrate what God was trying to do. And then the king sent this reply to Rehum and the commanding officers, Shimshai, the secretary, and the rest of their associates living in Samaria and elsewhere in the Trans-Euphrates. Greetings. This letter you sent us has been read and translated in my presence. I issue an order, and a search was made, and it was found that this city has a long history of revolts against kings and has been a place of rebellion and sedition. Jerusalem has had powerful kings ruling over the whole of Trans-Euphrates, and taxes and tributes and duty were paid to them. Now issue an order to these men to stop the work, so that this city will not be rebuilt until I so order. Be careful not to neglect this matter. Why let the great threat grow to detriment of royal interest? As soon as the copy of the letter King Xerxes was read to Rehum and Shimshai, the secretary, and their associates, they went and immediately to the Jews in Jerusalem and compelled them by force to stop. Thus the work on the house of God in Jerusalem came to a standstill until the second year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia. So we see it came to a stop for a while. But, God was still at work. He was still working to unfold his plan. And then it goes on to say, eventually, now Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the prophet, the descendant of Iddo, prophesied that the Jews in Judah and Jerusalem, in the name of God of Israel, who was over them. Then Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Joshua, son of Zadok, set to work to rebuild the house of God in Jerusalem. And the prophets of God were still with them, supporting them. So if you want to get some more information about this story, go to read Haggai and Zechariah. The books of Haggai and Zechariah also list some details that we might have missed in this narrative alone. This is more of a historical narrative, but there was some interesting information that you can get from the book of Zechariah and Haggai about this story. At the time, Tataniah, the governor of the Trans-Euphrates, and Shethar-Bozenah and their associates went to them and asked, who authorized you to rebuild this temple and finish it? They also asked, what are the names of those who are constructing the building? But the eye of their God was watching over the elders of the Jews, and they were not stopped until the report could go to Darius and his written reply received. This is a copy of the letter of Tataniah, governor of Trans-Euphrates, and Shethar-Bozenah and their associates, the officials of the Trans-Euphrates, sent to King Darius. This report they sent to him and reads as follows. The king should know that we went to the district of Judah to the temple of the great God. The people are building, and large stones are being and placing the timbers in the walls. The work is being carried out with diligence and is making rapid progress under their direction. We questioned the elders and asked them, who authorized you to rebuild this temple and finish it? We asked them their names so that we could write down their names of their leaders for your information. This answer they gave us: we are servants of God, of the God of heaven and earth. We are rebuilding the temple that we built many years ago. One great king of Israel built and finished, but because of our ancestor it angered the God of heaven, he gave them into the hands of Nebuchadnezzar of the Chaldeans, king of Babylon, who destroyed this temple and deported the people to Babylon. However, the first year of Cyrus, king of Babylon, King Cyrus issued a decree to rebuild this house of God. He even removed from the temple of Babylon the gold and silver articles of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple and brought to the temple in Babylon. King Cyrus gave them a man named Sheshbazzar, who had appointed governor.
he told them, "Take these articles and go deposit them in the temple of Jerusalem and build the house of God on its site." So Sheshbazzar came and laid the foundation of the house of God in Jerusalem. From that day to the present, it has been under construction, but is not yet finished. Now, if it pleases the king, let a search be made of the royal archives of Babylon to see if King Cyrus did, in fact, issue a decree to rebuild this house of God in Jerusalem. Then let the king send us his decision on the matter. So eventually, the king replies, "In the first year of King Cyrus, the king issued a decree concerning the temple of God in Jerusalem. Let the temple be rebuilt as place to present sacrifices, and let the foundation be laid. It is 60 cubits high and 60 cubits wide, with the course of large stones and one of the timbers. The costs are to be paid out of the royal treasury. Also, the gold and silver articles from the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took from the temple in Jerusalem and brought back to Babylon, are to be returned to their places in the temple of Jerusalem. They are to be deposited in the house of God. Now then, Tetaniah, governor of Trans-Euphrates, and Shethar Bozani, and you and other officials of that province, stay away from there. Stay away from there. Do not interfere with the work on this temple of God. Let the governors of the Jews and the Jewish elders rebuild this house of God in its site. Moreover, I hereby issue a decree that you are to do for these elders of the Jews in construction of the house of God. Their expenses are to be fully paid out of the royal treasury from the revenues of the Trans-Euphrates, so the work will not stop. Whatever is needed, young bulls, rams, male lambs, for burnt offerings to the God of heaven, and wheat and salt wine and olive oil, as requested by the priests in Jerusalem, must be given to them daily without fail, so that they may offer sacrifices pleasing to the God of heaven and pray for the well-being of the king and his sons. Furthermore, I decree that if anyone defies this edict, a beam is to be pulled from their house, and they are to be impaled on it. And as for this crime, their house is to be made a pile of rubble. May God, who has caused his name to dwell there, overthrow any king or people who lifts his hands to change this decree or to destroy this temple in Jerusalem. I, Darius, have decreed it. Let it be carried out with diligence."
Story very encouraging, because just because we encounter some difficulties and maybe delays along the way of what we feel like God has called us to do or what God has planned for our lives, doesn't mean he's stopped working in this situation. It doesn't mean that it's come to a final end. We see for a time progress stopped being made on the temple of the Lord in the city of Jerusalem, but God was still working in the behind the scenes to bring about his plan, and whatever God chooses to do, it's going to happen. We just got to trust him along the way. When we encounter obstacles and setbacks, God is still working all things together for our good, and we can trust him in that he will bring about his good purpose in his way and his time, and we need patience to wait on that. God bless.